a lot of people know who Coca-Cola is. I'm guessing no one in this room does not know who you are. But just a few fun facts. We have been around for 137 years. We do business in every country on the planet except for Cuba, North Korea, and recently Russia. We manage 500 brands across the universe, and with many of you, we are a highly franchised operation. People might not know that, but we have 225 independent franchise bottlers that really run our business. 60 of those in the United States. So the United States tends to be the most complex marketplace that we have. And our brands, with some of the CPG brands in here too, we only find our way to consumers through retailers or food service partners, historically. I'll talk about that historically in a second. So that's a little bit more about who Coca-Cola is. And Cerisse and I, we had some great time talking earlier this week after we talked about all of our kids and how life is crazy and how we're all looking forward to summer. She asked me a really good question that I couldn't answer. She's like, how did you get to e-commerce strategy? What was your pathway there? And fortunately, she let me off the hook and I didn't have to answer the question in a moment, but I had a chance to really think back, what have I done on my career journey to get to this point? I'm kind of one of those types of people that someone comes to you and says, hey, we're going to do this new thing. We don't really know how to measure success. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but we really need to do it. And I don't hear any of that stuff. And I just hear fun, challenging, yes, I'm in. Let's just go ahead and do that. So whether intentionally or unintentionally, I kind of segment my career in a solution of collaboration, capability development, and curiosity mixed in a full of chaos. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But I started with Coca-Cola really leading our shopper marketing organization and being in the retail space. And it's a great spot, I think, for a lot of people to start because it helps you really hone your skills in collaboration. You have to know how do you pass through those doors of the retailers to get to the consumers. We've got the brand teams with all of these great aspirations as to how that might look. But then we also have this very robust franchise model that actually makes those things happen in the marketplace. So really honing how do we collaborate across an entire concentric enterprise and figure out that win. And so I spent a lot of time in that space, and then I got a chance to do retail innovation and capability development. It's kind of a time in Coke's history where you were buying up a lot of brands, really expanding kind of the different categories that we were playing in. And so I got to be part of this little small but mighty team. You would never think Coke is small, but we do small but mighty teams. And our job really was to think about consumer back. How could we really think about our package strategy and optimize the categories and think about new route to market expansion? Again, a lot of people think of Coke of all this massive stuff that we have today, but when we really look back at our history, it's a kind of recent phenomenon for us. So we really had to take a step back and be very prescriptive about what our optimization strategy was and build out those capabilities. Then I got a chance to work in the global capability space in the Chief Customer Office, working with people like Barry Westrom and Maria Hoganson, who had to leave on the international dairy cane business. And really thinking about how we collaborate as a brand. We're kind of one of the few brands in a food service environment where consumers walk in and out of, oh, there's a Coke brand. Well, with that comes a huge amount of responsibility because we do have the power and capability to really help our business partners succeed in the marketplace, really be that ally to help them grow their brand. And we look at the food service business as if that customer wins, so does our brand. If they get more consumers in the door, our brand will follow. But that is a real test in our capabilities as an organization to think of it that way and not such a transactional exercise. From that, I got a chance to co-lead kind of our entire strategy capability organization for the food service organization and helping our entire cross-functional teams really think about strategy capabilities, not be the salespeople that walk in the door, but think about what are those things that we can do to really help our business partners drive their business? What value can we create? how do we co-author a collaborative business plan? And not just a short-sighted one, but one that really looks at the long-term vision. So I had a chance to do that. So kind of all those things combined, COVID and the chaos of COVID happened. What we call the online and offline part of the organization, which is our e-commerce business, we're kind of running that off on the side. But when we look at e-commerce, we look at it across the entire landscape. What do we look like in the food service environment? How do we show up on an app? How do we look at the retail space? How do we look on the online-only space? And we really needed to have somebody that could look across the landscape, figure out capability development, not only from an organizational perspective, but also our people. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And so I got the opportunity to go over into the e-commerce space right in the chaos of COVID. So that's kind of my career journey. Sometimes you find yourself in a lucky spot where it's like, yeah, I have all those things. You're looking to really evolve a strategy across all these platforms. I've been there, I've worked in the customer space and know what that looks like. And so I just got lucky to be able to do that. So thanks for the question. It gave me a chance to reflect. I really haven't even thought about that very much.
We've actually kind of moved into that a little bit. So my next question is, with your new role as job as it is, how did you approach building out e-commerce strategy?
Yeah, so we've heard a lot about the pandemic today and how it gave everybody kind of a chance to just reflect. What we realized is our e-commerce business was small. Some of you guys can think about what did your delivery and takeout business, your service operation look like before COVID hit. We were doing a great job kind of keeping up with the demands and the infrastructure that we were trying to really achieve in that space. But COVID just kind of blew that all up. And it became very clear that we needed to have a more cohesive strategy about what we wanted to do in this space. And, I said at the top of the talk, we're in pretty much across the planet, except for pretty unfortunate places. And so what I first did is look inside. Every marketplace, when you look, and it varies across the countries, in different cities, everybody's kind of on a different e-commerce maturation process. The way that consumers use, the convenience of e-commerce, the specific CPG brands in the marketplace. And so I spent a lot of time internally first, just meeting with all of the people across the planet. No better exercise than to understand what are we doing well and what do we wish we were doing better, or what do we wish we would have done better when we launched. Because sometimes you put a flag in the ground and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then moving that flag is almost impossible. So having the opportunity to kind of reset what we're trying to do in the United States and benefiting from what the rest of the countries around the world had been doing and where they had seen success, that was really really important part of the discovery process. And then I looked at, what other CPG companies struggle with a lot of things that we have that make e-commerce hard for us. We got big quality products. We really do, not across all of our brands, but we have high household penetration. And so P&G, if you've never looked at them, they've said, they hope that their business is 50% from the e-commerce world. And so taking a look at some of the things that they have been doing in the marketplace really helps coordinate that strategy. And then another great story, if you've never heard it, Liquid Death. It's a canned water product, it's not ours. But it's kind of one of those products that really trends. And I love how people are talking about bringing those products to the marketplace because before kind of COVID, I don't think we've heard about people choosing a different path other than I've got to get retail space, I got to get inside a store in front of consumers. And if you look at the Liquid Death business case, they did the absolute opposite. They were online first, and now you practically can't walk into anywhere without seeing Liquid Death somewhere. So, sometimes you gotta just look at what people are doing really well, even if it's not in your own space, and really think about what is that we want to be known for, how do we want to reset our strategy, and spend a ton of time talking to stakeholders. I just talked about how complex the U.S. marketplace is, and when we think e-commerce, it's food service, it's retail, it's online, but we also have the franchisee authors that really need to be part of the equation. We don't own that route to market. We don't own the end-to-end exchange. And so spending a lot of time thinking, talking, really evaluating, we landed on this notion of being within the fixed reach of desire of consumers. And what we mean by that is no matter where consumers run across our product in the social sphere, that it's a shoppable moment. That's the aspiration. There's a lot of things that go behind that. But part of the strategy there is figuring out how do you do that with a hybrid fulfillment model? Because you can't be optimistically supportive of 30-minute delivery, click and collect, and 2-day delivery. I mean, there's some trade-offs across all of that. Those of you that work in the e-commerce, .com space know there's a lot behind that. And so being really thoughtful and methodical about what does that mean, and really strategizing about where are we going to change the way that we've done things, and really look at how do we bring in D2C product to market. I talked about our only pathway before COVID was through retailers and food service, and we've tried a few ways to do direct to consumer. We're still learning, testing and learning, as we all do here, but that the framework is really designed to help support that notion of wherever consumers find our product, it's shoppable.
So as you built out this strategy, what did you learn along your journey?
Oh gosh, a ton. Getting product where it needs to be is not always an easy thing. And the e-commerce space is one of those, you guys know this, it's not rocket science, but we sometimes forget e-commerce is a space where we can turn on and off our marketing investment strategies. Unlike traditional where you maybe bought the ad, a year ago, we bought the display space a year ago, we all know, somebody used the term whack-a-mole earlier today. That's how we have been describing our supply chain. It's much better now, but in the code it was kind of like, well, we got this package, oh, we don't have that ingredient. So you find yourself in a position where you've invested in this asset to drive, brand XYZ with this type of return on investment, and then you get to that moment and it's not there. But in the digital space, we have that flexibility. And so one of the things that we really learned is that bridging that gap end-to-end, connecting the otherwise unconnected, really thinking about marketing typically sits over here, but we really need to bring it all the way through to supply chain, because that's how we really can make the most of the value statement that we're trying to make in the marketplace. And when we think about having, this really robust reach of desire for consumers, that has to be part of the set too. It can't just be the marketing aspiration that we have. It has to be all the way along the end-to-end journey.
So, it's going to be a lot. But you did something different. What would that have been?
It took us a while to really think through the notion of the and, the pivot to the and, because we have the traditional retail framework, and then the e-commerce framework. And really bridging those things to be a cohesive, connected environment where we're making a decision for traditional, and then we'll figure out e-commerce. It's all part of the same synergistic conversation and plan and approach. So it's not, I get done with this spot and then I need to move on to this one. It's all cohesively aligned across the organization. The thing that we still, and maybe others in this room, digital fluency is still something that needs to be embedded in the organization. Still, everything changes every day, and it can't just be a start and stop. It needs to be a start, stop, continue in every conversation. And so we learned a lot that we need to do in that space to really drive that home as well.
So as we look to the future,
So 2022 is a lot of test and learn. And I talked about digital fluency. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. Some of the things that we learned in the journey too is just expand your stakeholder base. I think it was Jen, she was talking about the number of stakeholders that you guys engaged in. I felt like we were ad nauseum, right? I mean, I felt like, oh my gosh, it would have been so easy to just like sit down and figure, okay, here's your e-commerce strategy. We talked to everybody around the world. We looked at Fiji, we looked at all these other players. But really being patient and being willing to expand your stakeholder assessment, and we still need to do some of that. We've missed some puzzle pieces along the way that I think had we had earlier in the process would have made us work faster and harder. The other thing is just really having a very clearly defined strategy. Everybody could understand this clicks reach of desire because we've long had this notion of consumers reach of desire. We want you to walk into a retail establishment and be able to find our brands. So that wasn't intuitive. It wasn't, it took us months to kind of frame that up. And then you guys have probably all been there and you're like, oh gosh, how do we describe this so that people can get it in like 5 words and we don't have to keep explaining what is the strategy. People understand what that means. The nuance of how it gets done can change. But if you have it very clearly articulated, here's the goal, here's the notion, you can pivot and adjust to what that looks like when you're really getting down to the brass tacks of implementing the strategy. So, I just encourage people to do that. Other thing that a lot of people have talked about in different ways today is really knowing where you want to play and where you want to win. And play doesn't look the same for every brand. The 500 brands don't look the same. Doesn't look the same for everybody either. But really being very deliberate on where it is you want to play, what is how big a voice do you want, and whatever you define to play in. And how I think it was, I forget if it was Maria or somebody else talking about bringing in that next generation. Like, how do you look at Web3? How do you look at, Metaverse and NFTs and, for brands like ours where it's like, this is not you are consuming it, but that's what is a physical thing that we're trying to get you to engage with. How do we bridge the gap over to the other side and make it very meaningful and authentic? So really knowing where to play is important, and just as important is where are you going to win, and at what expense. Is it win that buy box at all costs? It doesn't matter what buy box you're talking about. If it's Amazon.com, Target.com, the DoorDash delivery, like whatever that buy box is, where are you, what brands, what occasions are you dying on the vine for to win that buy box? So that's a lot of the work. And then everybody has talked about AI in some way today. And I would really challenge you guys to think about, I'm not saying we're doing this well, I'm just saying I'm looking ahead to the future. AI, machine learning, cloud infrastructure, all of those things are kind of, we're starting to become table stakes now. And the other notion is, how far back do you bring that in? We talked about end-to-end within the organization, but it's really an interesting thought to think about with speed and efficiency and agility that we all need to move in. And if you think about really making real-time media investment strategies and choices, how do you bridge that gap and maybe even think about back to your B2B partners? Now I know that's a whole different level of trust, transparency, communication, and that's really defining the box in a different way. But when you start thinking about how do we all move faster, how do we all incorporate everything together? Marketing is not just marketing anymore, supply chain has to work. But it is so much more than atmosphere, I would say, than maybe many of us thought it would be. Getting on the other side of this pandemic, but thinking about how do we bridge that gap, that organizational data gap, even further upstream is something to really consider.
I know we're kind of highball now. Yes. I do have one last question before that. I wanted to get back to the room and see if you have any questions.
Very.
What's been your biggest success in your
well, last year we launched Bites for the first time as an e-commerce only product. That's unheard of for our brand. I mentioned we're a franchise organization, so for us to own the direct route to consumer, there's a lot. I mean, I could just do a presentation on that. Let's say the whole business case in of itself, but just everything that went into just changing our traditional methodology in the marketplace to having trust with our business partners in the United States to actually go directly to consumers in a .com environment and knowing what that looks like. I mean, we were prepared for just sheer mayhem. So we prepared for, I don't know how many different scenarios. It seemed like 1,000, it wasn't that many, but not really knowing how that would be. But then just learning from that. And there's some, there's some things we would do differently. We didn't necessarily maybe win all the play spots that we thought we would. But we had a very authentic launch in the marketplace, and the consumers really resonated well, and we got a lot of the traction we were hoping for. But yeah, so that could be like hours in and of itself. Yes.
You talked about
Yes.
how do you balance all of this? And knowing that that's something that is throughout the organization, right? So
Yeah.
what does your interaction look like there day to day?
Well, unfortunate because we have a whole. I mean, I sit over strategy. We have a whole, marketing investment side of the organization, but it's really looking across the entire, not just looking at our digital investment strategy, but across the entire portfolio of how we want our assets to go work for us. All of our investments, whether they be in a retail space, on our own DC channel or direct to consumer channels, and really just trying to figure out, how do we optimize what levers we pull to make all of that work the way that we want it to. And this real notion of being that real-time, nimble organization is really important because you can miss out on so much. You can invest so much and not have the brand or package for the consumer to buy, but that investment is already out there. And we all know how razor thin everybody's investments are. You can't miss that moment. And so we spend a lot of time trying to think about how do we tie those things together really closely.
If there was 3 things companies have to figure out in this space in the next 3 to 5 years, what might those be?
I still think that play to win, being very deliberate of what you want your non-negotiable items to be, and really putting that stake in the ground. And this whole notion of data infrastructure, I mean, it needs to be a holistic view. I think that we struggle with this too. We're really good in this part of the organization of understanding end to end and can track that to an ant's eyelash, but we really need it not only in this part of the organization, but over here and back over here and sideways. And so, really having that holistic view of the data integration is important. And a legacy company like ourselves, I mean, we're not data scientists, or data engineers, but it's really worth the investment in trying to get better at that. You've heard tons of people talk about AI and data. I mean, that's really what's going to help us figure out how to do it faster. Thank you. Thanks, Cerisse.
Thanks, Lynne.